This break is brought to you by Netflix. Head on over to netflix.com/GameBreakerTV to sign up for a free 30-day trial. The first half of 2012 is now over, but we've already had a full dose of major MMO news to cover right here on GameBreaker TV. With us to recap the past 6 months is GameBreaker writer Jason Winner. Jason, what were some of the top stories of the first 6 months of 2012?
Well, number one I put on my list was 38 Studios and how that just went, belly up. We followed that. It seemed like every day there was some bit of new bad news coming out of there. So, and on the one hand, it was only tangentially MMO related. That's what this all is, about the best MMO news.
Right.
But on the other hand, this was something that we really hadn't seen, I think, for a long time, to see a company just do what it did, to just implode the way it did. So,
especially
on
its
the biggest thing of the year,
when all the focus was on taxpayers and the big controversy that came around to even just the non-MMO related crowd. I mean, this affected everyone. This wasn't just a gaming kind of drama. This was huge for even the political side of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it all over the place. I mean, we got a lot of our info from WPRI, the TV station in Rhode Island. Sports radio was on it, of course, because of the Kurt Schilling situation. I saw stuff about it on ESPN and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was really probably the most mass market news that intersected with MMO news of the year, and probably for a while still.
Right. So next up here, then it's coming in at number 2. Is news that actually just came out probably less than a week ago, is the Guild Wars 2 launch date.
Oh, finally. I still can't believe it's real, actually.
I know, right?
I had to check. When I saw the news go out, I saw it on my Facebook or Twitter. I was like, okay, is that really real? And I was like, okay, Guild Wars 2 site. Okay,
you get an email when when you get that email, you've got a pleasant surprise directly from ArenaNet telling you that the Guild Wars 2 will be launched this year. GameStop had it wrong. It was not released on the 26th of last month.
It wasn't on the 26th. It wasn't on the 28th like the jerseys said.
But it is.
It wasn't May 29th like I said. Oops.
So Guild Wars 2 release date. Fans can now get excited. They know when they can get their hands on the launch copy of this game.
Yeah, I mean, we've been waiting for this for about 5 years. I think the game was first announced in 2007. It was actually some initial thoughts, I think this might even come from ArenaNet back then, was that it was going to launch in maybe late 2009 or so. And that was kind of close. No,
just a little. 3 years,
Just a little off. Yeah, I mean, I remember actually looking back in old issues of our magazine that I used to do, where we had those exact reports out. It'll be a beta in late 2008, launch in 2009, no problem. So.
Next up, we are actually again another huge gaming company controversy was a lot with the Star Wars: The Old Republic decline, between a massive amount of layoffs, everything except for server merges, just the overall change that kind of came in 2012 for Star Wars: The Old Republic. Catch us up to speed on that.
Yeah, I mean, it launched, late 2011, and of course everybody knows, like you said, you pretty much touched on them, the server, not merges, what do they call it?
Well, there were server transfers.
The transfer, yeah, they didn't merge, they transferred. It's not a merge. But yeah, then the layoffs, and as we kept seeing in the investor calls, the subscription numbers going down, general discontent from a lot of different corners. It was really just... it makes you wonder, and not how long it's going to keep going. It's going to keep going for a while because they're not going to throw away the $300 million or whatever they invested into it. They're going to keep at it and hope that it still does a lot better. But it makes me wonder what it's going to be like in, say, a year or so. I think it's going to be a very different game.
What does this say for the pay subscription MMO? I mean, this was supposed to be, this was claimed as, I forget who it was, but one of the executives at BioWare said that Star Wars: The Old Republic was going to be the last standing subscription model MMO. Does this truly solidify that subscription is just, the way of the dodo?
Well, don't tell the people behind Secret World and Terra. They're apparently haven't been informed. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that sub fees are dead because of this. I think that to some extent you're definitely going to see more free to play. You're going to see sub fees start to dry up a lot more. But I think that this is more a result of just the sort of the hype that you couldn't really live up to. It reminds me of the prequels.
Sure.
For so long, people expected the prequels and expected them to be great, and they disappointed a lot of people. But on the flip side, they made like billions of dollars. So I'm not ready to call Star Wars: The Old Republic a failure yet, but it definitely needs to turn things around to even things out.
Wasn't received as well as what all the hype was kind of building it up to be. Next up, we have the Elder Scrolls Online, a massive series, RPG defining series that is now going to be turned into an MMO.
Yeah, and it was met with a very, very mixed reaction from the fan base. You know, cries of "Wow, clone" going out pretty much immediately. There's been a lot of press coming out, a lot of details about it, but it's difficult. People want to make their own judgments, and the stuff we're reading is maybe getting misinterpreted in a lot of ways. Even people at Bethesda are saying that it hasn't come out the way they necessarily wanted it to do, but it's going to be very interesting. This one is, after Guild Wars 2, really has about the only potential. What else we're seeing is being like the next really big thing, so there's probably a lot riding on it. It's going to be very interesting to see how it turns out.
Yes. Next up, we actually talk about Terra and the tribulations that Terra's gone through. You know, love it, like it, hate it, despise it. There are so many mixed reactions between just the vast amount of fans and critics out there. Was Terra's overall reception?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is one of those 1 or 10 games. Like, if people are going to rate it, they're either going to call it a 1 or they're going to call it a 10. There's not a whole lot of middle ground going on. You know, between the, you know, stuff like the skippiness of the female armor, especially, you know, with the Elon have been through one way or the other. The blood being turned off, I believe, in the British version, so it makes Peggy 12 or whatever it was. The lack of PvP, just in general, the general sense of it being kind of a pretty game, but a little too grindy, a little too much like older games. That even things like the combat has not been necessarily as well received by everybody as it was hoped. So it was one of the more hyped games going into the early part of the year, and it's sort of gone back and forth. It's just a question as to how much people are going to be able to look past whatever flaws it has and keep with it long enough to get to the good parts.
Next up, we actually, the next big topic is the fact that BlizzCon was canceled this year, and that's kind of big news. Maybe they just didn't want us to come back for a second year in a row. We threw too big of a party, and they're just like, no, we can't have Gamebreaker throwing another party like that. We need to wait another year to recuperate. So no BlizzCon this year.
Gary went and he totally trashed the place. They still haven't fixed it up yet, I guess.
He did.
But the official explanation was that they're concentrating their time on their other products. Diablo 3, which of course came out, and they probably should have concentrated a little more time on. World of Warcraft, of course, Mist of Pandaria, the expansion for StarCraft 2. So all sorts of stuff that they have been working on, they say, is taking up their time. And you know, on the grand scheme of things, as a gamer, as a Blizzard fan, you should like that they're going to devote their efforts to that as opposed to necessarily throwing a party. So.
You know, what about the fact that they, you know, Mike B and I have talked about this in previous hits, is that they maybe just don't have anything to show. At Gamescom this year, they're showing off Mist of Pandaria, Diablo 3, and Heart of the Swarm. We're not going to obviously have anything with Titan related. So if it was to come to BlizzCon, you know, in 3 months or so, they wouldn't have anything groundbreaking to give fans a chance to get their hands on. So maybe it's a better for them to hold off on BlizzCon until they have something really exciting to reveal instead of just throwing it just to throw a yearly party.
Yeah, I mean, when they do it in 2013, generally about every other year is when they've been announcing a new WoW expansion. They did that for Mist, and they did it for Cataclysm 3 years ago. And of course, yeah, maybe they'll have room for Titan there, or Dota also, or something like that. So.
Now, next up, it's no surprise that there's controversy going on over in EVE. But coming in at number 7 is the whole Burn Jita event that happened in EVE. Catch us up to speed on that.
Yeah, well, you had a bunch of players just deciding just going out and blasting the heck out of one of the major trade hubs in EVE, pretty much because they could.
just because we can. That's the best. But that's what makes fans love it so much, is that you can do it just because you can.
Well, being immortal and being very rich, I guess that's what you do, is you just get your ship and you go blow stuff up for a while. The numbers that they threw out there were incredible. It said 15,000 ships, firing about 250,000 rounds and doing 45 million points of damage.
Wow.
Yeah. That's more than I can do with my little guy with a sword. I have to say.
It's just they might need to work on that mega damage scaling there.
That must have been a really big spreadsheet there.
Yes. All right. Next up is some Rift news. We stopped hearing a little bit about Rift around the launch of Star Wars: The Old Republic. They went dark for a little bit, but just recently they've kind of come out of the woodworks, you know, trailblazing with all this really amazing content with Storm Legion. Are you excited about Storm Legion?
I am a little bit. I did let my Rift subscription lapse back in May, but hearing the things they're doing with their new PvP zones, the big like world versus world type areas, and of course you see the huge mother bleeping robot thing or whatever it was.
The massive scale encounter here.
I know. I see that and I think, you know, maybe I will check it out again.
Yeah, no, it's some awesome things that they're doing, and obviously every PvEer and even PvPers love the idea of open world bosses and where that brings things. So Rift, we are looking forward to seeing more of what you guys have in store for us as the rest of the year continues. Next up is that Dungeons and Dragons online has actually expanded with Menace of the Underdark. Can you give us some background there?
Yeah, the expansion just came out last week. Seems to be pretty well received from what I'm seeing, and it really is amazing too that you have a game like DDO, which came out 6 years ago, 2006, and followed such a weird path, you know, being virtually dead down to like I think 5 servers they had, and then of course they kind of turbined with that, kind of launched the free-to-play movement, or at least the notion of free-to-play switches in North America, and really revitalized the game to the point that they were actually able to make a full paid expansion to come out this year. So it's really something to see the path that game took to get to where it is today.
And finally up on the list we have the just really interesting, you know, concept of making an MMO that integrates with a TV show. So we're talking about Trion's Defiant. For people who maybe haven't heard about Defiant, give us a little bit of background on how Defiant is so groundbreaking.
Well, it's going to be both a video game made by Trion and also a TV show, of course, premiering on the Sci-Fi Channel. Both these are going to come out in April of next year. So, and you're going to have interaction supposedly between the two characters in the show popping up on the game, maybe characters in the game popping up on the show. I haven't quite heard exactly how else it'll work, if the gameplay will really be affected by stuff that goes on in the show. They take place in different cities, so it can't be a whole lot of interaction, you know, in terms of like, you know, raiding buildings or whatever like that. But it's definitely an interesting thing, something that we haven't really seen before, and I know a lot of us are really interested to see how it's going to turn out. Yeah,
there's definitely some interesting topics and conversations that we've had on This Week in MMO about Defiant and all of these games. So if you guys want to stay up to date on a weekly basis of all news coming in about MMOs, be sure to catch This Week in MMO Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PDT. Jason, thank you so much for the recap, and guys, thank you for watching. We will see you next time.